ภูมิใจที่ได้เข้ามาฝึกอบรมนักเขียนเรื่องสั้นและสารคดีผ่านมานี้ตัวเขาเองนี่ก็ส่วนหลายก็เป็นเขียนข่าวบทข่าวหรือว่าสารคดีข่าวในเมื่อมาฝึกอบรมเกี่ยวกับการเขียนเรื่องสั้นและสารคดีนี้จึงค่อยรู้ได้ว่ามันแตกต่างกันเพราะว่าเรื่องสั้นมันเป็นเรื่องนึงที่ว่าเป็นแนวคิดใหม่ๆจากจินตนาการของนักเขียนที่ใช้ออกมาแล้วก็สารคดีก็เป็นความจริงของบุคคลผู้นั้น
ในการฝึกอบรมครั้งนี้ก็ถือว่าได้มีการทำเรียนอยู่ในภาคปฏิบัติตัวจริงก็คือว่าหลายได้ออกไปปฏิบัติตัวจริงถือว่าการไปปฏิบัติตัวจริงเฮ็ดให้พวกเรานั้นถือว่าสมองกว้างออกเนาะถือว่าได้คิดมีแง่คิดที่ดีๆหลายคนก็ถือว่าได้มีการสนทนาแบบกันเองหลายกว่าเนาะอันนี้ก็เป็นบทเรียนใหม่ๆอันนึงอีกเนาะที่ว่าบ่ทันได้เคยมีในการทำเรียนครั้งนี้ก็ถือว่าเป็นอีกเส้นทางหนึ่งที่เฮ็ดให้พวกเรานั้นสามารถเดินไปอีกก้าวหนึ่งเนาะ
สำหรับพวกเราแล้วในมื้อนี้พวกเราได้นัดมาฝึกอบรมในจำนวนซ้ำนี้คำบันไดให้100%ก็แห้งดีนะสำใดสิคืนในสำใดเมียนพวกสหายพวกน้องแต่ละคนพวกหลานแต่ละคนเก็บกรรมตรงนี้ได้สามารถอธิบาย
In December 2006, a creative writers group, together with the Department of Information and Culture of Bolakamsai Province, conducted a creative writing workshop for writers and journalists. The objective of the workshop was to develop creative and critical thinking amongst young writers and journalists of the province. The workshop aimed at upgrading their writing skills in writing fiction and non-fiction. In the workshop, the participants shared their experiences by reading their own stories and discussing stories written by Lau and other well-known international authors. By doing this, these young writers were exposed to new ideas and writing styles, representing both classic and modern writing. Short stories by such luminaries as O. Henry, de Montespan and Chekhov were read, as well as those written by new and contemporary writers from ASEAN member nations and other countries. Screening various types of documentaries from NHK, Discovery, BBC, Lao and Thai TV helped the participants understand the story structure inherent to a good feature, particularly the lead, the bridge, contents and conclusion. Energise is a means for relaxing and a good break from working under mental pressure all the time. The workshop used participatory learning, reflecting our belief that every human being has unique potential which can bring out the good within and be shared with other human beings. No one is an empty glass in which to pour knowledge. Rather, each is a precious stone with hidden radiance. Both resource persons and participants were given the opportunity to cultivate themselves so that the gem within each one could be polished and shine forth. In essence, resource persons and participants have the same and continuing potential to learn. Both sides listen and learn from each other. The opportunity to experience village life was very important for the workshop participants. They saw and felt the reality of rural life by chatting with villagers, observing their daily lives and sharing daily activities with them. The workshop participants were asked to closely observe and use what they saw in their writings, describing the people's appearance, giving their stories a sense of place, and to create a narrative made up of events and descriptions which created a meaningful whole. Returning to the workshop venue, all participants had gathered invaluable material and visual textures which they turned into stories. First, they wrote the outlines on big sheets of paper and presented them to the class so that their peers could make comments. Then the participants shared their story structure with resource persons for suggestions and improvement. The group were taken out of town to spend several days in the natural environment. Travelling by boat alerted these aspiring writers to understanding the river's importance to rural people, how its continual flow is the rhythm by which life goes on. The preservation of water sources was one of the most important themes reflected in their stories. Nature provides a marvellous place for writers to work on their stories. After making merit at the temple, they looked for a quiet place to relax their minds and to begin to focus on the journey of writing. Among the trees, rocks and whispering grasses, ideas emerged, one after the other, from word to sentence and from sentence to paragraph, and finally from paragraph to story. A social gathering was organised on the following week at a city temple. The villagers and students from 2 upper secondary schools were invited to take part in the auspicious event. Each group took turns to sing their songs, some specially written for the event. Then the workshop participants and students read their stories and essays to the audience. Both positive and negative comments made by the villagers were respectfully received. The aspiring writers had been given an invaluable chance to open their minds to the different world and lives, which would in turn allow them to improve their writing in the future. On this occasion, students, writers and villagers had a chance to show off their combined talents at role-playing. The event was somewhat out of the ordinary for all concerned. For most, it was an unforgettable experience, and for those who participated, it was the first time that writers, students and villagers saw the interdependence of their worlds. The writers acknowledged that they needed to learn more from the majority of Lao living in rural areas, because these people have a lot of interesting things to tell them, out of which emerge precious material for writing. After receiving feedback, the writers rewrote their stories, improving them after consultation with their new colleagues. Then, with the assistance of senior writers and resource persons, their written stories developed into interesting and impressive form. At the closing stages of the workshop, the participants again read their stories and received comments from their peers. This was an increasingly productive and constructive process, since each one had gained confidence and critical abilities. Their comments, at first quiet and rather general, became more constructive and imbued with sincerity and openness. Most of them reported that they'd learnt a lot from this experience.
เจ้าวิธีเจ้าแปลงจะต้องแปลงวิธีใดจะต้องแปลง
บนกระดาษ
เนี่ยหน้าบนเพดานหลังจากนั้นเลยเราจึงเราจึงมานั่นเลยมีคนเลยอยู่ใน
ผู้ดีนึ่งข้าวสุก
During the evaluation of the workshop, most participants agreed that they had learned a lot from the workshop, having gained confidence and faith in their abilities to write features and short stories.
เปลี่ยนบรรยากาศ
The last activity was to finalise their stories by making them interesting and compelling for the readers.
นี่เป็นลักษณะมาอีกเลย
แต่ยังไงก็ตาม
And finally, the last day arrived. Each writer was handed a certificate at the closing ceremony. 16 features and 18 short stories were produced at the workshop, and these stories are ready to be published in the form of a book. 2 of the best features and short stories were read by the authors in front of the large audience who witnessed the remarkable achievements of these aspiring writers. We discovered that some participants had real talent and a desire to write, and we strongly believe that in the future they can produce fabulous literary works.
เส้นทางที่หับเพียงโคดโค้ง
The biggest gift we can give is to build up a sense of confidence, critical thinking and strength in these young writers and journalists.
อยากจะเป็นนักเขียนสีมือดีอยากจะสร้างซีวีช่วยสังคมหลายอย่างขึ้นเหนือลงใต้เขียนสหายทางเพื่อนหญิงเพื่อนสาวอยากจะเป็นนักเขียนเด่นต้องหาเงินหูเฮียนน้ำคู่มันจึงจะเป็นต้องหาเงินหูเฮียนน้ำคู่มันจึงจะเป็นเขียนโดยความจำเป็นมันก็บ่เด่นบ่ดังดอกหนาคิดถึงเบิ่งดาราเป็นดวงจันทร์สายตาคงพบกันในกันทางโอ้ลาขอลาไปก่อนเด้อลา